The sun was setting over the small town just outside Atlanta. Golden light painted the streets as Big Mike walked home from the grocery store. At 45, he was a big man with a round face, carrying extra weight that made him look soft and harmless. That's exactly how he wanted to look these days. 20 years ago, he had been different, lean, sharp-eyed, and dangerous. Back then, he was Commander Thomas, leader of one of the most elite military units in the world. He had led missions in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. He had made decisions that changed the course of conflicts and saved countless lives. But that was another life. Now he was just Big Mike, the friendly guy who coached basketball at the community center and worked from home as a security consultant. The kids loved him because he was patient. The neighbors respected him because he was always ready to help. Nobody in town knew about his past, and that's how he wanted it. Need to get these hot dogs and burgers home, he thought, adjusting the heavy grocery bags in his arms. The community cookout tomorrow was his idea, a way to bring the neighborhood together. The new families needed to feel welcome, especially the ones who didn't look like most of the old residents. The town was changing, and not everyone was happy about it. Big Mike took the shortcut through Pine Street. It was quieter than the main road with fewer streetlights. As he walked, his old habits kicked in without thinking. His eyes scanned the area, noticing the smallest details. A cat slipping under a fence, a curtain moving in a window, a car parked where he'd never seen one before. That's when he felt it, the feeling he knew too well from his former life. The back of his neck tingled. Someone was watching him. He kept walking at the same pace, but his mind shifted into a different gear. 5 men, following about 30 yards back, he thought, hearing their footsteps and hushed voices. They started, following after I turned onto Pine Street. Without turning his head, he adjusted his walking route slightly, giving him a glimpse of their reflection in a parked car window. Young men, moving with purpose. Big Mike didn't change his pace. 20 years of special operations had taught him to stay calm in dangerous situations. His breathing remained steady as he mentally noted all possible routes away from here, places where he could take cover, and everyday items that could become tools if needed. Maybe they're just heading the same way, he thought, but he knew better. The way they spread out slightly, the hushed whispers, the occasional laugh that sounded more nervous than amused. These were men looking for trouble. He shifted his grocery bags, freeing up one hand in a way that looked natural. His mind calculated distances and angles, assessing the situation as he'd done countless times in far more dangerous places than a quiet street in small-town Georgia. The footsteps behind him quickened. Big Mike heard a bottle break against the curb. "Hey, big man, you lost?" a voice called out. Big Mike kept walking, pretending not to hear. Maybe they'd lose interest if he didn't engage. "I'm talking to you." The voice came again, closer now. Big Mike could hear them jogging to catch up. He stopped and turned slowly, his face calm and friendly despite the storm building inside him. 5 young men spread out in a half circle in front of him. The tallest one, with a shaved head and arms covered in tattoos, stepped forward. His eyes were hard, his mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Seems like you didn't hear me," the tall man said, getting too close. "I asked if you were lost. This neighborhood has a certain character we like to maintain." Big Mike understood perfectly what the man was saying. He'd seen this before. People who thought they could decide who belonged and who didn't based on nothing more than skin color. "Just heading home with groceries for tomorrow's community cookout," Big Mike said, keeping his voice friendly and calm. "You boys are welcome to come by. Starts at noon in Miller Park." The tall man laughed, looking back at his friends. "You hear that? He's inviting us to a cookout." The other men chuckled, moving slightly to block the street behind them. Big Mike noticed everything. How they positioned themselves, which ones seemed eager for trouble, and which ones were just following along, which ones might have weapons in their pockets. His mind, trained through thousands of hours of the most intensive combat preparation in the world, processed it all in seconds. "Look, I don't want any trouble," Big Mike said, still smiling. "Just trying to get these burgers home before they spoil." "Maybe you should have shopped somewhere else," the tall man said, stepping even closer. Some folks around here get uncomfortable when certain people start moving in, thinking they own the place. Big Mike carefully set his grocery bags down on the sidewalk. 20 years ago, he had commanded men in firefights across 4 continents. He had parachuted into hostile territory, led hostage rescues, and stared down threats that would make these young men run home crying. But nobody looking at him now would see that person. They saw only what he wanted them to see: a middle-aged, overweight black man who looked soft and harmless. They didn't see Commander Thomas of the Delta Force. They didn't see the man who could take down all 5 of them without breaking a sweat. "Last chance to be smart about this, boys," Big Mike said quietly, his friendly smile never wavering. "I'm just a neighbor trying to get home." The tall man reached into his back pocket, his face twisting with anger. "No, you got it all wrong. This is your last chance to understand you're not welcome here." Big Mike's body tensed slightly, invisible to untrained eyes. His weight shifted to the balls of his feet. His hands, relaxed at his sides, were ready to move faster than anyone would believe possible. 20 years of the most elite combat training in the world didn't just disappear. What these young men couldn't see was the calm, calculating mind behind Big Mike's friendly eyes. A mind that had already mapped out exactly how this confrontation would unfold if they pushed it too far. As the tall man pulled something from his pocket, Big Mike remained perfectly still, waiting. All his life he had protected people. Even now, retired and hidden away in this small town, that instinct remained. But he hoped, for everyone's sake, these young men would make the right choice. "So what's it gonna be, boys?" Big Mike asked, his voice gentle but firm. "Are we going to have a problem here, or are you going to let a neighbor walk home in peace?" The tall man's hand came out of his pocket holding a small flashlight, which he shined directly into Big Mike's eyes. "You think we're joking?" the man said, his voice getting louder. "We protect this neighborhood. We decide who belongs here." Big Mike squinted against the light but didn't move. His mind worked through different ways this could play out. In his past life, he had talked down armed rebels and negotiated with warlords. These angry young men didn't frighten him, but he worried about where this situation might lead. "I've lived here for 3 years now," Big Mike said calmly. "Cook at the shelter on Thursdays, coach basketball on weekends. Maybe we've even seen each other around town." The tall man's friends shifted their feet, looking at each other. This wasn't going the way they expected. Most people would show fear by now. "Don't matter how long you've been here," one of the other men said, a skinny guy with a red cap. "Things are changing back to how they should be." Big Mike nodded slowly, as if considering their words. "Change happens, can't stop it. But we can choose how we respond to it." He gestured to his grocery bags. "That's why I'm organizing the cookout tomorrow, so neighbors can talk face to face. Maybe find we have more in common than we thought." The tall man stepped forward suddenly, knocking one of the grocery bags over with his foot. Hot dog buns and condiments spilled onto the sidewalk. "Oops," he said with a cruel smile. 20 years in special forces had taught Big Mike incredible self-control. In combat situations, he had remained calm while bullets flew past his head. Now, watching mustard splatter across the concrete, he took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "That wasn't necessary," he said, his voice still even. "Those were for the kids tomorrow." The man in the red cap seemed uncomfortable now. "Come on, man, let's just go," he said to the tall man. "This ain't worth it." "Shut up," the tall man snapped, not taking his eyes off Big Mike. "We're just getting started here." Big Mike saw the signs: the tight jaw, the clenched fists, the way the tall man kept shifting his weight forward. This man wanted a fight, needed one even. Big Mike had seen this type before in war zones and training grounds around the world, men who defined themselves by their capacity for violence. "Listen to your friend," Big Mike said to the tall man. "Walk away now and we forget this happened. I won't even mention the groceries." The tall man's face flushed red. "You telling me what to do?" He stepped closer, close enough that Big Mike could smell stale beer on his breath. "You don't give orders around here." 2 of the other men moved forward as well, flanking their leader. The remaining 2 stayed back, looking increasingly nervous. Big Mike shifted his stance slightly, a movement so subtle that untrained eyes would miss it. To these men, he still looked like an overweight middle-aged guy trying to avoid trouble. But he was now perfectly balanced, ready to move in any direction with explosive speed. "Last warning," Big Mike said quietly. "Don't do something you'll regret." The tall man laughed and put his hand on Big Mike's chest, giving him a hard shove. To the surprise of everyone watching, Big Mike barely moved. It was like pushing against a tree. For a split second, confusion flashed across the tall man's face. Then anger took over, and he swung his fist toward Big Mike's head. What happened next seemed impossible to the watching men. Big Mike moved with a speed that didn't match his size, simply tilting his head to one side. The punch missed by inches, throwing the tall man off balance. Before he could recover, Big Mike had gently but firmly gripped the man's wrist and redirected his momentum. The tall man stumbled forward, tripping over his own feet, and fell face first onto the sidewalk. It looked like an accident, like the tall man had simply lost his balance while throwing a wild punch. Only Big Mike knew the precise pressure, points he'd touched to help the process along. "Stay down," Big Mike advised. "Better for everyone." The tall man scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of rage and embarrassment. He charged forward like a bull. This time 2 of his friends joined in, rushing Big Mike from different angles. For a man his size, Big Mike moved like water. He sidestepped one attacker, redirected another with a light touch to the shoulder, and used the tall man's momentum to guide him into a clumsy collision with the 3rd attacker. All 3 ended up in a tangle of limbs on the ground. Not once did Big Mike throw a punch. Not once did he use the devastating strikes he had learned in years of close-quarters combat training. His movements were defensive, designed to avoid harm rather than cause it. The 2 men who had stayed back now backed away further, eyes wide with disbelief. "What the?" one whispered. "How did he?" The tall man struggled to his feet again, breathing hard, a small trickle of blood coming from his nose where he'd hit the pavement. His eyes were wild now, his pride wounded worse than his body. "You're dead," he spat, reaching into his jacket. Big Mike saw the glint of metal and moved instantly. 20 years of combat instincts took over. In one fluid motion, he closed the distance between them and gripped the tall man's wrist with precisely calibrated pressure. "Don't," he said softly, his eyes locked on the tall man's. Something in those eyes made the tall man freeze. For just a moment, the mask of the friendly neighborhood coach slipped, and the tall man saw something that made his blood run cold. The steady, calculating gaze of a warrior who had faced far worse threats than an angry young man with a pocket knife. The knife clattered to the sidewalk. "Go home," Big Mike said in a voice that was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Now." The spell broke when headlights swept over them. A car slowed as it approached, the driver peering out at the scene, several men on the ground, scattered groceries, and Big Mike standing calmly in the middle of it all. The tall man jerked his wrist free and backed away. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. Big Mike just nodded. "It's over for tonight. Tomorrow's a new day." The 2 men who had stayed out of the fight were already walking away, while the others picked themselves up, bruised more in pride than body. As they retreated, casting dark glances back at Big Mike, the car that had slowed down pulled over. The window rolled down, revealing an older woman with gray hair. "Everything okay here?" she called out, her voice concerned. Big Mike bent down and started gathering his spilled groceries. "Just fine, Mrs. Wilson. Some of the boys were helping me with my groceries. Bit of an accident." Mrs. Wilson didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Need a ride home, Mike?" Big Mike smiled, once again the friendly neighbor everyone knew. "That would be mighty kind of you, ma'am. These hot dogs aren't getting any cooler." As he loaded his salvaged groceries into Mrs. Wilson's trunk, Big Mike watched the group of men disappear around a corner. The confrontation was over, but something told him that this was just the beginning of a bigger problem. "Strange boys," Mrs. Wilson commented as Big Mike settled his large frame into her passenger seat. "Don't think I've seen them around before." "They're around," Big Mike said quietly. "We just don't always see them until they want to be seen." Mrs. Wilson's old sedan pulled up in front of Big Mike's small house at the end of Oak Street. The, porch light was on, casting a warm glow over the neatly kept front yard. "Thank you kindly for the ride," Big Mike said as he gathered his grocery bags from the trunk. Some items were missing, others squashed, but he had saved enough for tomorrow's cookout. "You sure you're all right?" Mrs. Wilson asked, her eyes concerned behind her glasses. "Those boys didn't look like they were just helping with groceries." Big Mike smiled. "Nothing I couldn't handle, but I appreciate you stopping." "Well, that's what neighbors do," she said. "By the way, I'm bringing my potato salad tomorrow, the one with the secret ingredient." "Looking forward to it," Big Mike said with a genuine smile. Mrs. Wilson's secret ingredient was just extra dill, but nobody had the heart to tell her they all knew. After waving goodbye, Big Mike carried his groceries inside. His house was small but tidy, simple furniture, a few photos on the walls, nothing fancy, nothing that would suggest the man who lived here had once commanded some of the most dangerous missions in recent military history. He put the groceries away and then stood still in his kitchen, letting out a long breath. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing. The confrontation had awakened something in him. Old instincts, old awareness. Big Mike walked to his living room window and looked out at the quiet street. The town had been peaceful when he moved here 3 years ago, looking for a place to disappear after retirement. A place where Commander Thomas could become just Big Mike, the friendly guy who kept to himself but helped out when needed. "Might be time to check," he muttered to himself. He went to his bedroom and opened the closet. Behind his everyday clothes, he unlocked a hidden panel in the wall. Inside was a small safe. His fingers moved automatically, entering a code he would never forget. The date his team had pulled off their most impossible mission, saving 30 hostages without firing a single shot. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside was a satellite phone, a passport with a different name, and a slim laptop that had never connected to the internet. Big Mike took out the laptop and turned it on. After logging in with a complex password, he typed a simple message. "Weather. Changing in Georgia. Possible storm forming." It was a code that would tell his old commanding officer that something was happening. Nothing urgent yet, but worth noting. He'd promised to use this channel only if absolutely necessary. In 3 years, he had never touched it. Until tonight. Big Mike sent the message, shut down the laptop, and returned everything to the safe. Then he went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea. As the kettle boiled, his phone rang. "Hello? Mike? It's Officer Taylor from the community center. Sorry to call so late." Big Mike checked his watch, just past 9:30 p.m. "No problem. Everything okay with the kids?" Officer Taylor was a local cop who volunteered at the center where Big Mike coached basketball. He was a good man, straight as an arrow, and genuinely cared about the kids in the neighborhood. "Not exactly," Taylor said, his voice tight. "Just got a call about some trouble on Pine Street. Apparently some guys got into a fight with a big man carrying groceries. Wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Big Mike took his time answering. "Might have had a little misunderstanding with some fellows on my way home. Nothing serious." There was a pause on the line. "These fellows are saying you attacked them." "That right?" Big Mike said, keeping his voice neutral. "Yeah, that's right, and normally I'd be driving over to take a statement from you right now. But Mrs. Wilson already called the station, said she saw the whole thing, said these guys were harassing you and you didn't do anything but defend yourself." Big Mike smiled. Mrs. Wilson hadn't seen much of anything, but she was looking out for a neighbor. "She's a good lady." "She is," Officer Taylor agreed. "But Mike, something you should know. These guys who hassled you, they're connected to some folks we've been watching. New group in town causing trouble, calling themselves the Guardians or some such nonsense." Big Mike's military mind immediately clicked into gear. "How organized?" "Organized enough to worry me," Taylor said. "Started as just talk, but lately they've been getting bolder. Vandalism, intimidation, the works." Big Mike thought about the tall man's eyes, the hate he'd seen there. They mentioned things changing back to how they should be. Yeah, that's their line. Taylor sighed. Listen, Mike, I wanted to warn you. These guys hold grudges, and after tonight, you might be on their list. I know you can, that's not what worries me. There was a pause. Look, there's something else. The tall one, their leader, guy named Reed, he was bragging down at the station about how they're planning something big. Wouldn't say what, but he was talking about sending a message at some community event. Big Mike's hand tightened on the phone. The cookout tomorrow. Could be. Or the town meeting next week. Or the high school football game Friday. We just don't know. Officer. Taylor's voice lowered. We're stretched thin, Mike. Budget cuts, officers leaving for better pay in the city. We can't be everywhere. Big Mike understood what wasn't being said. I'll keep my eyes open tomorrow. Appreciate that, Taylor said. And Mike, be careful, these guys are trouble. After hanging up, Big Mike sat at his kitchen table thinking. The peaceful life he'd built was starting to crumble around the edges. He'd chosen this town because it was quiet, far from the chaos he'd known for 20 years. A place where no one would look twice at a big man who kept to himself. But trouble had a way of finding him no matter how far he ran. Big Mike got up and walked to a drawer in his kitchen. From the back, he pulled out a small notebook filled with names and numbers, contacts from his old life, people who owed him favors, people with skills and resources. He hadn't opened this notebook since moving to town, hadn't needed to. For a long moment, he stared at it, flipping through the pages. Then he closed it and put it back in the drawer. Not yet. This was still his home, his community. He would handle this like a neighbor, not a soldier. Big Mike went to bed that night with his window slightly open, something he hadn't done since leaving the service. Old habits coming back. As he drifted to sleep, his mind was already planning for tomorrow, anticipating threats, considering defenses. The cookout was meant to bring the community together. Now it might become something else entirely, a battleground. But if these guardians thought they were going to intimidate his neighbors or disrupt the peace of this town, they were in for a surprise. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They saw only Big Mike, the friendly coach. They hadn't met Commander Thomas yet. In the darkness of his bedroom, Big Mike's eyes opened. Sleep wouldn't come easy tonight. He got up and began to prepare, not with weapons or armor, but with phone, calls to neighbors he trusted, subtle changes to the cookout layout, suggestions about where certain families should set up their tables. Tomorrow would look like a simple community gathering, but to trained eyes, it would be a carefully orchestrated security operation. Big Mike smiled to himself in the dark. Some skills you never lose. Morning came with golden sunlight and the sweet smell of spring. Big Mike was up before dawn, moving with purpose around his small kitchen. He cooked breakfast methodically, eggs, toast, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in it. The routine calmed him, gave his hands something to do while his mind worked. By 7, he was at Miller Park, setting up for the cookout that wouldn't start until noon. The early hours would give him time to prepare in more ways than one. Though, park was perfect for a community gathering. Open grassy areas, a playground for the kids, picnic tables scattered under shade trees. As Big Mike unloaded supplies from his old pickup truck, he studied the layout with new eyes. Not just as a neighbor planning a cookout, but as a security expert assessing terrain. 2 main entrances, he muttered to himself. Basketball courts provide elevated viewing of the whole area. Trees give cover but also create blind spots. He began setting up the grills and tables, but with careful planning. Food tables positioned to create a natural boundary around the central area. Coolers placed strategically to slow down any quick approach. Grills located where they gave a clear view of both park entrances. Anyone watching would see just a big man preparing for a neighborhood party. They wouldn't notice how he was creating a secure perimeter, establishing lines of sight, setting up a defensive position that looked like nothing more than a friendly gathering. By 9, the first volunteers arrived to help Mr. Chen from the convenience store bringing extra paper plates. The Washington Twins, high school football players who'd been coming to Big Mike's basketball training since they were skinny 10-year-olds. "Morning, coach," they called in unison. Big Mike smiled. "Boys, appreciate the help." As they worked, Big Mike gave casual instructions. "Let's put the kids' games over by the oak trees, good shade there." What he didn't say, the massive tree trunks would provide cover if needed. Maybe set the drink station closer to the basketball courts. Unspoken reason, higher ground, good visibility, more neighbors arrived. Mrs. Wilson with her potato salad. The Garcia family bringing homemade salsa and chips. The Robertsons with their famous barbecue sauce. Big Mike greeted each one warmly, but his eyes never stopped scanning the park edges, watching for unusual movement. At 11, Officer Taylor arrived in his civilian clothes, a cooler of sodas in his arms. He found Big Mike by the main grill. "Quite a turnout already," Taylor said, nodding toward the growing crowd. "Community coming together," Big Mike replied, flipping burgers. "Any word on our friends from last night?" Taylor set down his cooler. "Nothing specific, but there's chatter. Reed was making noise at Barney's diner this morning, talking big about taking back the town and such." Big Mike nodded slightly. Eyes open then. "Always," Taylor agreed. "Got 2 off-duty officers coming as guests. They'll be here soon." By noon, the cookout was in full swing. Over 100 people filled the park. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers, a true cross-section of the town. Music played from portable speakers. The smell of grilling meat filled the air. Children chased each other across the grass. On the surface, it was exactly what Big Mike had planned. A day for neighbors to meet neighbors, for community bonds, to strengthen. But beneath that friendly gathering, invisible currents ran. Big Mike moved through the crowd, flipping burgers, refilling drink coolers, playing basketball with the kids, all while maintaining perfect awareness of everyone entering the park. Officer Taylor and his off-duty colleagues did the same, their casual postures hiding their vigilance. At 1 o'clock, Big Mike noticed them. Reed and his friends from the previous night, plus about 10 others, gathering at the north entrance to the park. They stood in a tight group, watching the cookout with hard eyes. Some wore matching red caps. Others had similar tattoos visible on their arms. Big Mike continued cooking, but his senses heightened. He caught Officer Taylor's eye across the crowd and nodded slightly toward the north entrance. Taylor gave a barely perceptible nod back and casually drifted in that direction. The standoff continued for 20 minutes. The group at the entrance grew to about 20 men, all with the same hostile stance, the same watching eyes. The cookout continued around them, most people unaware of the tension building at the edges of their celebration. Big Mike was considering his options when an unexpected ally appeared. Mrs. Wilson, 70 years old and barely 5 feet tall, marched directly toward Reed and his group, a plate of food in her hands. "You boys hungry?" Her voice carried across the park. "Plenty to go around, that's why we call it a community cookout." Reed looked startled, then sneered. "We don't want your food, lady." Mrs. Wilson didn't back down. "Well, that's a shame. Big Mike over there grills the best burgers in the county, but suit yourselves." She turned to walk away, then stopped. "You know, my late husband used to say that a man who can't break bread with his neighbors isn't much of a man at all." She left the plate on a nearby table and walked back to the cookout, head held high. The moment hung in the air. Reed and his friends shifted uncomfortably, suddenly conscious of how they looked. Angry men glaring at families enjoying a sunny day in the park. A few mothers had noticed them now and were gathering their children closer. Some of the fathers were starting to pay attention, moving subtly to position themselves between the group and their families. Big Mike watched it all, ready to move if needed. But sometimes the best tactical advantage came from unexpected places. Like a fearless old woman with perfect timing, Reed finally broke the silence, muttering something to his friends. 3 of them peeled away from the group and headed toward the food tables. Not Reed or the men from last night. They remained, at the entrance watching, but the others approached the cookout cautiously. One of the Washington twins intercepted them, offering paper plates. Burgers are over there, drinks by the basketball court. Help yourselves. The men took the plates awkwardly, clearly not having expected this welcome. They filled their plates and stood at the edge of the gathering, eating in silence. Big Mike kept cooking, but he felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The rigid line between us and them had blurred just slightly, not broken, but weakened. All because of food and an old woman's courage. Reed and his core group remained at the entrance for another hour, their faces growing increasingly frustrated as they watched some of their friends actually talking with cookout attendees. Finally, Reed called out to his scattered followers and they reluctantly rejoined him. The group left together, casting dark glances back at the park. As they disappeared down the street, Officer Taylor approached Big Mike at the grill. "That could have gone much worse," he said quietly. Big Mike nodded. "Round one to us. But the fight's just starting." "What do you mean?" Big Mike flipped another burger before answering. "Man like Reed doesn't retreat. He regroups. This wasn't their real play." "Then what was it?" "Reconnaissance," Big Mike said simply. They were counting numbers, checking layout, looking for weaknesses. He'd seen the same tactics in conflicts around the world. They'll be back. And next time, they'll have a plan. The cookout continued as the afternoon sun began to lower. Children played. Neighbors laughed and talked. Community bonds strengthened, exactly what Big Mike had hoped for. But as he cleaned up grills and collected trash, his mind was elsewhere, planning for the battle he knew was coming. Because Reed and his guardians hadn't given up. They'd just changed tactics, and Big Mike needed to be ready when they made their real move. 3 days after the cookout, Big Mike sat in the back row of the town hall. The monthly community meeting was packed, more people than usual, probably because of rumors spreading about Reed's group and their activities. Mayor Thompson stood at the podium trying to calm the crowd. "Folks, please, I understand your concerns, but we need to address this in an orderly fashion." A man in the front row stood up. "My son was threatened at the gas station yesterday. Those thugs told him this town wasn't for his kind. What are you doing about it?" Voices rose in agreement. More people shared stories: intimidation at the grocery store, vandalism at the community center, threatening messages left on car windshields. Big Mike watched silently. Since the cookout, he'd been gathering information, listening at the barbershop, chatting with the high school kids he coached, talking with Officer Taylor. A clear picture was emerging. Reed's guardians were escalating, getting bolder, and they were planning something big for the town festival this weekend. Mayor Thompson raised his hands. "The police are aware and investigating, but we have limited resources." "That's not good enough," someone shouted. The meeting dissolved into arguments. Some wanted immediate action against the guardians. Others worried about inflaming tensions. A few even suggested canceling the festival, which only angered people more. Big Mike finally stood up. His size alone drew attention, and the room gradually quieted. "Name's Mike," he said simply. "I coach basketball at the community center. I'm not much for speeches, but I'd like to say something." Mayor Thompson nodded gratefully. "Please, go ahead." Big Mike looked around the room, making eye contact with different people. "I've lived in plenty of places, seen communities torn apart by fear and hate. And I've seen communities stand together and overcome it." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "Reed and his friends want us afraid, want us fighting each other, want us canceling festivals and hiding in our homes. That's how they win." The room was completely silent now, everyone listening. "But there's more of us than them, and we have something they don't have: real community. I saw it at the cookout. We look out for each other. That's our strength." An older man near the front nodded. "So what do we do?" Big Mike smiled. "We hold our festival, but we do it smart. Everyone, watching out for everyone else. Parents staying close to their kids. Neighbors checking on neighbors. Officer Taylor and his team can't be everywhere, but our eyes can be." He turned to the mayor. "With your permission, I'd like to organize a community watch for the festival. Not vigilantes, just neighbors looking out for neighbors. We see something concerning, we alert Officer Taylor or his deputies. No confrontations. Mayor Thompson looked relieved. I think that's an excellent idea. Plans formed quickly after that. Big Mike found himself at the center of organizing security for the festival. On the surface, it looked like simple community volunteers, information booths, lost child stations, first aid tents. But underneath was a carefully coordinated system designed by someone who had secured military bases in hostile territory. The night before the festival, Big Mike's satellite phone buzzed, the first response to his message sent days ago. Text appeared on the screen. Weather report received. Resources available if needed, confirm. Big Mike stared at the message for a long time. His old commanding officer was offering help, probably a team of operatives who could quietly eliminate the threat posed by Reed and his guardians. It would be clean, professional, and permanent. But this was his home now. These were his neighbors. And some problems needed to be solved by the community itself, not by shadows from his past life. He typed a simple reply. Situation being handled locally. Will advise if status changes. Then he turned off the phone and went to bed. Festival day. Dawned bright and clear. By 9 in the morning, Main Street was transformed. Booths selling food and crafts, a stage for local bands, games for children. American flags hung from lampposts. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy filled the air. Big Mike moved through. The growing crowd, checking in with his volunteer team, positioned strategically throughout the festival area. Everyone wore blue caps, easy to spot if someone needed help. By noon, the festival was in full swing. Families laughed and ate. Children rode the small carnival rides. Elderly couples sat in the shade, tapping their feet to the music. On the surface, a perfect small-town celebration, but Big Mike's team stayed alert, communicating via text messages in a group chat he'd set up. Mrs. Wilson reported from her pie-judging booth. Mr. Chen watched from his food stall. The Washington twins patrolled the carnival rides. Officer Taylor and 4 deputies circulated visibly through the crowd. At 2 o'clock they arrived, Reed and at least 30 followers, all wearing red caps or armbands with their guardian symbol. They moved as a group to the edge of the festival, their faces hard and determined. Big Mike's phone buzzed with alert messages from his team. He watched as Reed directed his people to spread out through the festival in small groups. Not causing trouble yet, but positioning themselves. For what? The answer came when Mayor Thompson took the stage for the festival's main event, the annual Citizenship Award ceremony, honoring community service. This year's recipient was Dr. Patel, who had opened a free clinic for uninsured residents. As Dr. Patel approached the stage. Reed's groups began moving inward, converging. Big Mike saw their pattern instantly. They were forming a perimeter around the stage area. He texted Officer Taylor, "Moving on the stage. Now." Then Big Mike headed straight for Reed, who stood near the back of the crowd, directing his people with hand signals. "Afternoon," Big Mike said, stepping up beside him. Reed flinched in surprise, then scowled. "What do you want?" "Just admiring your coordination," Big Mike said calmly. "Military training?" Reed's eyes narrowed. "Did some time in the Army." "What's it to you?" "Nothing much. Except I'm curious what you're planning for Dr. Patel's speech." Reed's face hardened. "Don't know what you're talking about." Big Mike nodded toward 3 of Reed's men, now positioned near the stage steps. "Your guys getting ready to rush the stage? Maybe grab the mic? Make some kind of statement about who belongs in this town and who doesn't?" Reed stared at him, shock flashing in his eyes before he controlled it. "You don't know anything." "I know enough," Big Mike said quietly. "I know Officer Taylor has just detained 2 of your people who were carrying spray paint to vandalize the stage. I know the Washington twins are currently blocking 4 more of your boys from reaching their positions. And I know that everyone wearing a blue cap in this crowd is watching your people right now." He gestured around them. Throughout the crowd, Big Mike's volunteers were visible, each one standing near one of Reed's followers. Not threatening, not confronting, just present and watchful. "Community watch," Big Mike explained. "Neighbors looking out for neighbors." Reed's face flushed with anger. This isn't over. Actually, it is, Big Mike said. Look around you. Reed, this is our town, all of ours. Dr. Patel, who came from India 30 years ago. The Garcia family selling tamales over there. The Chen family with their craft booth. The Washington twins, whose grandparents helped build this town. And yes, even you, if you'd just see it. He pointed to the stage, where Dr. Patel was receiving his award to enthusiastic applause. That man has saved lives in this community. What are you offering besides hate? For just a moment, uncertainty flickered in Reed's eyes. Then his radio crackled. One of his men reporting that they were being blocked, asking for instructions. Big Mike held Reed's gaze. You've got a choice right now. Escalate and face arrest, or walk away and think about what you really want for this town. Reed looked around, seeing his plan falling apart as his followers were neutralized not by force but by community solidarity. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, Big Mike thought he might choose confrontation. Then Reed keyed. His radio. Fall back. Regroup at the base. He glared at Big Mike. This isn't the end. Maybe not, Big Mike agreed, but it's a start. As Reed and his followers retreated from the festival, melting away in ones and twos, Big Mike felt a presence beside him. Officer Taylor stood there watching Reed leave. That could have gotten ugly, Taylor said. Big Mike nodded. Still might someday, but not today. Not today, Taylor agreed. The festival continued, most attendees never knowing how close they'd come to trouble. As the sun began to set, turning the sky golden over the small town, Big Mike sat on a bench watching children play tag on the town square grass. His phone buzzed, a message from his old commander. Status update? Big Mike smiled and typed, Fargus weather clear, situation resolved locally. Then he added, I'm home.